So our goal is to make sure that this figure, when it's drawn, doesn't have any parts of the figure exceeding the boundaries of the drawing canvas. The drawing canvas is here. We want to make sure that our figure is drawn so that all of its parts can be seen. So this is going to involve a conditional statement. But before we can write our conditional statement, we have to figure out what are the conditions that we need to check. The conditions that we need to check are that this edge point here, our minimum x value, doesn't go beyond 0. So that doesn't go into the negative. So if this position here goes beyond the edge of the canvas, then the figure should not be drawn. So, okay, another one of our conditions would be that the maximum x value, this being the maximum x value here, so this is the minimum x value, the smallest x that would possibly be part of this figure relative to the position of the head. So the next condition is that the maximum x value, which would be found here, doesn't go beyond the width of the drawing canvas. Okay, similarly, we want to look at the smallest y value, which would be at the top of the head, which would be the head center position plus, or it's actually, which would be the center of the head minus the radius of the head. This would be the y minimum position. This would be the x minimum position. This would be the x maximum position, let's say. So we want to make sure that this y minimum position doesn't go outside the boundaries, so it does not go less than, or it does not become less than 0. Okay, we'd also want to find our y maximum position. This would be our y max here at the bottom of the figure, and we want to make sure that the y maximum, so I'm not very good at drawing here, doesn't exceed the height of our drawing canvas. So what we want to do is we want to, in our code, figure out what are these points, what is the x minimum, what is the x maximum, what's the y minimum, what's the y maximum, and we're going to compare each of these points to the appropriate values. So x minimum is going to be compared to 0. So if x minimum is less than 0, then part of the figure would be beyond the drawing canvas. If x maximum is greater than the width of the canvas, then our figure would be drawn outside the boundaries. Similarly, if y minimum is less than 0, then it would be outside the boundaries, and if y maximum exceeds the height of the drawing canvas, then the figure would be outside the boundaries. Okay, so how are we going to calculate these various positions? We're going to create a variable for each of these and do the calculations within our program to find x min, x max, y min, and y max. So x min is calculated by the x position of the head minus the radius minus the dress offset. The maximum x value is the center position of the head, the x value of that, plus the head radius plus the dress offset. The minimum y value, this one up here, is going to be the center position of the head minus the radius of the head. And the y maximum position, way down here at the feet, is going to be the y position of the head plus the head radius plus the length of the dress plus the length of the legs. So we're going to define these as variables in our program, and then we're going to be able to compare these variable values with each of the edges of the drawing canvas. So that's what we're going to do next. Go to the code. So last time we had our stick girl function, takes in the head x, head y, and the head size and draws the stick girl relative to the head x and the head y using the head size. And this was all within a function. Okay, so I've taken the liberty to define all of these variables, the x min, x max, etc., in my program. And these are going to come up with values for each of these various positions. Now I want to build my conditions. So what do I want to do with this? I want to say if the figure would be drawn, so if the head position is such that the entire figure would fit on the drawing canvas, then I want to go ahead and draw the figure. If not, then let's say I just don't want to draw anything at all. So essentially what I want to do is I want to say if the figure will appear in the canvas. Okay, so now I'm writing pseudocode, not Python code. I'm just getting my skeleton here in place. So if the figure will appear in the canvas, then I want to draw the figure, which is what I'm doing here with this code that I have highlighted. So in this case, I want this to be in my if block. So if these conditions are true, such that the figure will all appear within the drawing canvas, then go ahead and draw it. So I'm going to use the edit function here to increase my indent here, because this will be my whole block under my if statement. So if the figure will appear in the canvas, then I do the code that's in the indented block, which is going to be draw the figure. Otherwise, so I put my else out here, and it actually indents this correctly for me. So otherwise, and I'll just put a note here, don't draw anything. Okay, so let's go back up here and try to fill in my conditions then. So if the figure will appear in the canvas, what does that mean and how do I write that in code? Well, for this to be true, then xmin must be greater than 0. Xmax must be less than the width of the canvas. Ymin must be greater than 0. And Ymax must be less than the height of the canvas. So I'm going to write those as conditional expressions. So if xmin is greater than 0, so all of these things have to be true in order for the figure to appear within the drawing canvas. So I'm going to use AND operators here to string all of these conditions together. So if xmin is greater than 0 and xmax is less than the width of the canvas, and ymin is greater than 0 and ymax is less than the height of the canvas, if I could spell height. If all of these conditions are met, then I want to draw the figure. Otherwise, do nothing. Okay, so let's come down to my else statement. So otherwise, I don't want to draw anything. In this case, because I'm not taking any action whatsoever, I don't need to have this else statement. So what's going to happen if one of these conditions is not true, then I'm simply going to drop out of this block and come down to the last part of my function. If I don't have anything there, that's the same as doing an else do nothing. So I'm going to take that out. So let's give this a try. So let's first try with 250, 250, because we know that that's going to draw correctly, or it should draw correctly. Okay, so that fits within my drawing area. Now let's put my head way up here in the corner. So let's make it, say, 1010. With a head size of 40. When I make it 1010, this will put it outside the drawing canvas, and my stick girl doesn't draw. So it's taking that action based on the values that I've passed it in. So when I use 1010 up here, that's going to put some of the figure outside of the drawing area. Okay, the way I've done this doesn't give any feedback to the user. So this is not really a very user-friendly program. So just because you've defined parameters that are going to put it outside the drawing area, nothing appears. Your user might be a little bit confused. So it might be better to put an else statement down here and say print, sorry, nothing is drawn as your parameters are outside of the drawing area. So we might print something for the user, which would appear in the console down here. Okay, so the thing still the drawing canvas still pops up, but now I've got a message from my user saying, oh, sorry, this is why I didn't draw that stick figure. Okay, you've given me parameters that aren't valid. Okay, so now we've used an if and an else. So you might think that I have different conditions here. Why am I not using an elif statement to check these different conditions? The reason is that I'm not doing something different for each of these different conditions. So if this condition is true, then do this. If this condition is true, do this. That's not the type of situation that I have here. I want to check to see if all of these conditions are met. Then I'm going to do one particular thing. I'm going to draw the figure. I'm not doing something different for each of these conditions. So in this case, I use a single if statement, check all of these conditions, and I could put an else in if there's something that I want to do